Okay, the Councillor Remuneration Mansion. Conflict of being interested, or right. The Hardy Annual. I sat through the Warra District Council meeting yesterday where this item was discussed. So it'll be interesting to see the themes remain the same. Over to you.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Yes, a paper that you will be interested in, I'm sure, is the basis of it is our annual kind of information that we've received from the Remuneration Authority, and they obviously an independent body which sets your remuneration for the coming year. So that is at 1st of July each year. It's reset through a determination, and they've given us a heads up on what that will be. So basically it's a 2% increase on where we are at the moment, so congratulations, great work. So everyone gets a 2% increase, which is great, but we do have to make a decision today about the second part of this paper, which we've tried to set out here as plainly as we could, but it might take a little bit of mulling through. So currently we've got 6 what they call positions of additional duties. So we've got our 5 committee chairs and our deputy chairman, which are our 6, which we nominated probably this time 3 years ago. That was the decisions that council made then. Since that time, we've also obviously had the Finance Audit Risk Subcommittee start as well, so I guess that comes into the reckoning on all this as well. So what we've done is they historically have given us a pool to divvy up on your discretion. That was 150% of the base councillor salary. So basically 1.5 times the base councillor salary we could divvy up. And there were certain percentages on that one person could get, had to be under certain percentages. What they've done is they've obviously had some issues with that in other councils. And so what they've said now is that pool has expanded to 200% if you want to. There's no requirement to use that whole pool. And the percentages have been taken off as well, so that can be split a bit more varied than previously. So what we've done is kind of given you that information where we stand at the moment, and given you kind of 2 options as an example. Really, they're not the only options that you can decide on today, but we've thought that was a good place to start. So currently what we've done is taken that pool, split it between the 6 positions, and everyone's got the equal distribution of that. So that's that current 150%. With a new 200% pool, we could just keep it the same as in the 150%, so everyone gets that same uplift, or we could have a version of anything you like in between. So I guess the main points are that we do have to go back to the authority by the 16th of May, so we do need a decision reasonably promptly, hopefully today if we can, to go back to them with our outline of what we think, what you think the positions should be and what the remuneration for each of those positions are. If that's simple as it is at the moment, that it's all the same, that's great. If it's not, then we will deal with that as we go. And I think probably the only other thing is obviously with elections coming up in October, that always makes things tricky. But this decision would stand for that whole next year from July to June, unless a new council coming in wants to make some changes to those positions or the remuneration around those positions. So, Fenton, how would you like to approach this? I guess that's the question.
Well, throw it open to the floor. How we'll approach it, Councillor Dick.
Yeah, man, thanks for that. Just to clarify, what powers would an incoming council have? I mean, naturally it can establish chairmanships and other positions of authority, But if hypothetically, say, the 2% was applied across the board, would a new council have the discretion to be able to alter the increment that's paid for positions of authority?
Yes, I believe so. So they can, within those parameters that we've got here, they can rearrange how it looks and the amount of money distributed to those.
So, so a key way of doing that, Councillor Dick, is that the incoming council, for example, could decide to have a completely different committee structure, which would mean that either the numbers of chairmans, committee chairs, could be altered significantly, and they could also decide that or recommend or seek the approval of the Remuneration Authority to adjust that additional allowance. But as Manton has pointed out, between the parameters that are provided now, between the 150 and the 200%. That would be right, Manton?
Yes.
Councillor, if you look at the amount of money, the amount of money for additional duties is 98,940. So that's the maximum amount you can spend on additional duty positions. So what's spent for this up to the election, there's a remaining amount after the election, whatever that is. And if the new incoming council decides to move around the positions for additional duties, as long as they work within the 98,000, they're okay.
Councillor Scott.
I'd just like to, I've got 3 questions around the 2%. It's shown as a cost of living adjustment. Have the staff all received a 2% increase over this period?
That hasn't been determined for the 2016-17 year, but I understand the budget is based on approximately that figure, but it was 2% for the current year.
Thank you. And can I, if we were to refuse the 2% at this stage, would that commit the next council? Would it set, considering we have to let the Remuneration Authority know by May, does that actually set it in stone for the next council until the next financial year?
Yeah, my understanding of that is, I think we've had this debate before, I don't think you've got any option but to accept the level that they indicate to pay for ordinary council duties and chairman. But if you don't want the money, then you can donate it to charity or something. I think we decided on that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Manton, but the two options, the first at 2% leaves, what, $24,000 or $25,000 unspent of the discretionary funds, and the second one at an 8.8% increase spends it all, right?
Correct.
So if an incoming council wanted to create an extra committee, for instance, and remunerate the chair appropriately, it would have to reshuffle all of this.
Yes.
Yeah. So what's the justification for the increase to 8.8%? Just the fact that the money's available.
Yeah, effectively, we just wanted to give you both ends of the scale. Status quo, or what we could use up to, given the current roles that we have. But definitely don't have to use that. Yeah. And it might be worth adding that this is, obviously, they don't give us the money to pay it's within our council budgets that we have to pay for this, and a little bit of a surprise that they've come through with this is only hit kind of our desks last month. So our annual plan budgets for next year only have the 2% increase in there. So we'd have to kind of look at that as well, depending on your decisions.
So in other words, if we went to just 2%, it would be within our plan?
Correct. We've allowed for 2%. Yes. Yeah.
So there'd be we'd have to find extra money or cost extra rates.
Correct.
Okay. Councillor Hewitt.
I'm prepared to move.
Okay. Councillor Scott, did you have your hand up for another question? Or? No other questions? Move. What do you want to move?
So I'm prepared to move 1, 2 and 3.2 and 4.
I'll second.
Yeah, hang on. What was that? 1, 2,
3.2
What about 4?
and 4.
Yep.
So 3.2 is more than the 2%.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. 3.1 is 2%.
So we have a seconder for that?
Oh. Sorry, you're moving 3.2? No, I can't second that.
No,
Speak to this,
no second.
need
No,
a
no.
seconder to
Let's.
speak
We will speak to it. So,
If there's no second, I'll move 3.1.
and someone happy to
1,
second,
2, 3.1 and 4.
and you're happy to second that. Okay, we can have a chance to speak shortly. Councillor Graham, you wish to speak?
Yes, Mr Chairman. We've got a very tight budget. We've looked very hard at pruning everywhere, and I don't think at this stage that it's appropriate to start by rewarding ourselves ahead of actually honouring all the other areas that we've told everybody to tighten their belt. When in an earlier council, in fact when I was first on council, there was a very big differential between ordinary councillors and chairs, and in my second term on council, when I actually had my first chairmanship, we actually sought quite hard to reduce that and to spread the payment in a fair distribution of the workload that ordinary councillors also carry. And I think the differential now is...
Stop.
is,
Who's got the beeping thing? I can help you
Push
turn
the
that off,
button.
councillor. There's a bucket of water out the back.
push the button.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Scott.
And I think what we've got now is a very fair differential, and I think that we've been through our annual plan process, and we need to see that we fit within the budgets that we've set.
Seconder.
Oh, I think Councillor Scott has said most of it. It's, I think it's a fair increase every, given the economic climate at the present time, given that the staff have received a 2% increase. I don't think that it's up to us to make the decision as to a new council, what they are going to do. It'll be up to them. The new council will decide on the structure and the payments required. So I'm quite happy to support this 2%.
Councillor Graham and then Councillor
It has actually all been said. From my perspective, I graciously accept the 2%, but I wouldn't want to accept more than that, and I certainly wouldn't want to accept a differential above my fellow councillors other than I've already got as a chair. So I'm very strongly that on option 1.
Councillor Hewitt.
I'm not a great fan of the current council structure. I think that going into the new council, it will be important to see the Finance Audit and Risk Committee as a standalone committee now that we've got it up and running, and I've made some observations. So I think setting the systems in place to have the funding to be covering for another council committee would be prudent. That being said, it's neither here nor there, no matter what the figure is. In terms of council remuneration, I don't think that the figure, whether it's 2%, no percent, or 8 whatever percent, fairly reflects the time commitment that's put in, that councillors put in, and I'd also make the observation that being a councillor prevents a lot of other opportunities. So I certainly don't apologise for being paid in the role that I have, but yeah, as I say, my reason for looking at another one was to actually just future-proof the council for what I will be recommending to the incoming council as an alternative committee structure. Thank you.
Okay. Wish to speak?
Yeah, just briefly, I think if you have a look at the general debate around the world, people are grumpy that some people get enormously bigger salaries than others. There's a disparity. And I think the resolution we have here of making the same amount across the board is one that fits with what the public mood is. And to have enormous increases for some and not for others is just not acceptable today. And I agree with that.
Summing up, all done. I'll put the motion that all those in favour please say aye, and the contrary no. Carried. Thank you. Right, now let's go to item 12 on page 37. Appointment appointment of the on-scene commander. Region 1.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm happy to speak to this paper. I think the paper's pretty self-explanatory. It's a duplication of a paper we brought to you last year when I qualified as an on-scene commander. Jim Tetlow's joined us from Blair Penty Regional Council. He actually did the same course as myself. I think I got a higher percentage than him though, pass.
Be never proven, will it?
And he provides an opportunity for us to expand the team and gives us, I guess, extra capacity to allow for cover and a response should we need it. So happy to take questions.
Councillor.
Yeah, Mr. Maxwell, I'm just quite interested in, you talk about the amount of money that is possible to expend in the event of a spill, up to 250,000. What? Can you give me an idea of the sort of range of cost, you know, from minor to, obviously the 250 is the major. What would be the sort of cost and what's involved there?
And it's a really valid and interesting question actually, because we have what we call tiers of response to oil spills. So tier 1 is one where, for example, a refuelling bunker may have spilt a minor amount of fuel oil and are able to clean it up themselves. So, and they'll advise us, but they will manage it within their resources. Tier 2 is where the regional council on-scene commanders get involved for a spend up to $250,000. Typically, we're dealing with things like spills in the port around hydraulic fluid for cranes. There's been a couple of recent incidents like that. Costs typically fall about $20,000 to $30,000 for that response, that type of response.
What do those costs cover, though? I mean,
it covers staff, equipment. So any use of equipment is applied against the spiller. Clean-up, contractors, boats, food, accommodation if required, if there's external people, if there are oiled wildlife, the costs of those dealing with oiled wildlife, those sorts of things. So $250,000 sounds like a lot, but actually it's not in the scheme of things. The RENA, which was what we call a Tier 3 event, so should a situation on that arise, the control of that incident would be assumed by Maritime New Zealand and their national response team based in Auckland. And they've got the ability to spend a lot more money than we do as on-scene commanders. The RENA was the most expensive shipping disaster in modern time, many millions of dollars to deal with that. So $250,000 would deal with a relatively low, what I would describe as a low-level incident, given the technical challenges, the types of equipment and the time taken, because bearing in mind a response doesn't end once you have perhaps cleaned the oil off the surface of the water. There may be weeks of ongoing shoreline cleanups or wildlife, dealing with wildlife that are oiled. You know, the response can go on for weeks or sometimes months afterwards, depending on the type of incident.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mr. Morley. Recommendation reaffirms. I just don't see any justification for that. If we've done something, do we need to reaffirm it? Do we often reaffirm things? So if it's agreed that recommendation 3 is unnecessary, because I think it is, then I'm happy to move recommendations 1 and 2, Chair.
So just a question around reaffirm.
So look, good spotting. I didn't actually notice that had gone in. The key reason we bring this appointment to the council table is for legal purposes, because the on-scene commander has powers under the Maritime Transport Act, and we need to have demonstrated that they've been appointed by council. You've already appointed me and others, so I'd be comfortable you don't need to do that.
If you were really feeling all that, I'm happy to note that we've already appointed.
Great.
But we don't need to reaffirm. I don't want us to get into the habit of having to make a decision, then reaffirm a decision. Bad practice.
No, I'm happy
to do it once.
So do you want to? So we're clear, Councillor Barker. So you've got 1 and 2 as written. 3, we either delete or we put notes the appointments.
Yeah, notes the existing appointments are.
Okay, notes the previous appointments. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Elegant solution.
Elegant.
Seconded. And you wish to speak?
No, I'm happy with the way it is. Thanks.
Happy to no further speakers. Put that motion in. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, no. Carried. Okay, page 51, the monthly work plan through May 2016. Yeah, no, and condolences as previously stated. Yep. So I have one here to kick things off. Starter for 10. To Mr. Palmer, number 83 on page 56, in regard to Rocket Lab, etc. Can you give us an update on what that exactly means?
Thank you, Chairman. We were recently invited to Auckland. Liz and I attended a meeting with Rocket Lab in their facilities in Auckland, along with representatives from Business Hawke's Bay, Wairoa District Council. And that was really to get a better handle on the likely regional needs to support Rocket Lab's operations at Mahia Peninsula. It was revealed during that meeting and then confirmed subsequently that it's almost certain that there will be no manufacturing of rockets in the foreseeable future in the region, and that in all likelihood that manufacturing will continue in Auckland, with rockets either partially assembled or fully assembled arriving by road in the first instance, with some potential possibly in the future for rail. The Rocket Lab management have indicated that their most pressing needs in the short term are providing accommodation and food and entertainment for their staff that looks in the order of about 20 folk on site at Mahia, and VIP guests that they bring to the region for observing the first few launches. And probably the additional thing is managing public interest in the launches, particularly during the early phase when there'll be high degree of uncertainty about the timing of launches. And the company's indicated that it would very much like to be able to go about its early phase of early launches, undertaking its proving activity without terribly much pressure from the community or the public about when it might launch and how frequently it might launch, etc. So that activity is due to be undertaken the second half of this year into early next year. Following that, once Rocket Lab get on to a commercial phase and are launching rockets with some regularity, they're very interested in working with Hawke's Bay Regional Council, Wairoa District Council on the facilities to support visitors in observing rockets rocket launches on a regular basis. So we're currently having talks with Wairoa District about funding a study of the particular infrastructural needs that will arise from both the visitors and the increase in Rocket Lab's presence in the region with their staff and their VIPs as well, and how that might complement other tourism development which is proposed for that part of the region. So it's likely that within the next week or so we'll have a study underway, and that will enable us to be better informed about what particular activities, particular pieces of infrastructure and what particular investment might be required either from this council or for Wairoa District or both.
So just to follow on from that, excuse me, the study though, or a particular piece of work that you talk about, which I welcome, fantastic, but surely you would look at other opportunities in Wairoa as well. The rockets are one thing, and will attract a certain type of tourist, no doubt, but we do have other things happening up there. So I mean, just is it a chance to do a general stock take of what the opportunities are up there and how we could best capitalise on them, with or without Rocket Lab?
The Regional Economic Development Strategy, which is in finalisation and due to go to the governance group in the next week or two, has a particular focus on increasing visitor experience and spend in the region. Within that theme, if you like, of the Regional Economic Development Strategy is a particular focus on Wairoa District. And within that, opportunities at Lake Waikaremoana, the improvement of State Highway 2 and the traffic and road transport of visitors up and down the coast. And there is a cluster of opportunities around the northern part of the Hawke's Bay region for tourism, of which rockets sit quite nicely, but are not the sole focus. So the intention would be that our study would look at the totality of those opportunities, and look at the synergies, if you like, between the different activities. In the event that a rocket launch is delayed, and this is something which will happen quite often, you'll have visitors to the region that might have come to watch a rocket being launched and have a day or two spare. It might be rained out, the weather might be windy, who knows, and we'll be looking for something else to do. Similarly, people that come to the region for other regions, visiting the lake, undertaking a cycle tour up that way, a range of other things may well just add watching rockets into the mix of activities for themselves. So we're very much seeing Rocket Lab as a welcome addition to the tourism offering up there, but the infrastructural needs and the promotional needs do need to be undertaken in a holistic manner, and so that's the way we're thinking about the study.
Good work.
Following on from that, who's going to undertake that study?
We're presently in discussions with an expert provider based out of Wellington, a gentleman by the name of Bamford, and that's been on the recommendation of Hawke's Bay Tourism, but we'll be undertaking the appropriate contracting processes to ensure that we get the appropriate advice at the appropriate price.
And would there be an intention to try and focus or attract the use of accommodation facilities in Wairoa Township as opposed to Mahia?
Yeah, so that's one of the issues that needs to be looked at. There are lots of ideas floating around, but what we lack are hard numbers. So we need to get a better handle on precisely the numbers that can be accommodated in the region now, and that's not only in terms of hotels, motels, it's also things like Airbnb, Book a Batch, and the B&B market, etc. There's quite a range of different accommodation offerings up that way. And so the consultant will be asked to get a handle on precisely what's there today, what do numbers look like on a range of forecast scenarios, and what's the mix that those visitors will be looking for in terms of different accommodation offerings. Many will come by campervan and will require a certain type of facility. Others will be looking for budget accommodation, and then there'll be those looking for high-end as well. As part of our thinking with this, though, we are thinking also about Napier Hastings and the rest of the region, because it's probably self-evident that somebody looking for luxury accommodation at the high end that might be associated with owning satellites being launched into space and the like, are possibly more likely to be better served in this part of the region with some of our existing accommodation providers, rather than trying to establish a very high-end luxury accommodation facility in somewhere like Wairoa. So getting that mix right and talking to investors with some good hard information about the opportunities is our objective.
Yeah, I'd hope that the consultant would involve our Wairoa constituency member, our chairman, because he knows the place intimately, obviously, and it seems to me that there's a wonderful opportunity for the utilisation or the upgrading and utilisation of some facilities that are are in Wairoa but are grossly underused. What, you've got three hotels. You've only got two motels. You've got a little camping ground. It's a nice little camping ground, but there's a whole lot of sort of inherent capacity there for upgrading and really a transformation of that little town.
And at the very least, Councillor Nick, I know how to get there, so I can get them up there. There's one thing.
Thanks, Chair. Just another follow-on question for Wairoa. Very early on in the term of this particular council, we made one of our first field trips up to Wairoa, and I think as part of that we met with the Wairoa District Council and agreed to develop an economic strategy. So my question is, the one that you just mentioned before, is that looking at opportunities more wide than just tourism?
So I was referring to the regional economic development strategy for the entirety of Hawke's Bay, and tourism is one theme in that strategy. It also has a good number that cover primary production, our service sector, innovation across the region, branding, education pathways to employment, etc. So it's holistic in terms of looking at the economic and social needs of the region going forward.
I have a couple of things, but firstly I'd just like to vouch for the Ferry Hotel. Wonderful. My first...
which part of the Ferry Hotel you're talking
out
about?
the back.
Oh, I thought you were talking about the
with the
public part.
truckies. Just on page 51, Coastal Strategy, the drop-in sessions, I just want to say, if councillors could be notified what the times for those Hamoana and West Shore, because I'm sure some of us respectively in those areas would like to attend that. I certainly would. And also on page 53, the submissions for Waitangi Estuary to Eastern and Central and the lotteries, if we could just have an update of that sometime, just where we're at. It's been in there a month. I don't know if we get a good progress on that. It's quite important to us. 43 tomato mushrooms, a pretty good result. Just want to say, it was a very good result, and a lot of negotiations and backdoor discussions gone to achieve this. Just one little niggle. I don't think it was great that a whole lot of people turned up and doing high fives with our staff at the court, after the court. Just, when you win something like this, or when you do a deal, it's kind of best to just keep it down. And I was told that happened. I don't know if it did happen, but there was a bit of... I heard from a source that it did. So, when you win something like this, or you have a result and it's good, it's really good for everyone to get around the table and say, well, let's go forward. And I think that's where we want to do. Gracious is the word I'm looking for. Thank you, Councillor. 77. I'm really interested in that Hawke's Bay Maori strategic relationship issue, and it goes over to point 88.2. I'm just interested in who we're talking to. Make sure that we do talk to. When you talk to Marydom, nobody knows who to talk to really, and that's been confirmed. But there are some major players there, like Kahanunu Asset Holdings in this region, and some of the major players in Wairoa that are going to be the decision makers in this area. And finding the right decision makers and getting with the right people, and so that you can go forward, because you can talk to somebody and you'll get no effect. The guys that are holding the capital, I just make that point. And Wairoa, of course, tourism is definitely a possibility, but the other economic development, which Councillor Bevan was probably alluding to, are just huge. And I'm really interested to see the Wairoa district's economic and see whether it links into what we're thinking as well and what our team is thinking. I thought James did an outstanding speech in the Wairoa Tech Day, and just hope that we can bind everyone together on the go forward, and not only Wairoa but all of Hawke's Bay.
Councillor Pipe.
Yeah, thank you. I have a number of questions. Can I just go back to what you were originally talking about with the REDS, Regional Economic Development Strategy? Just as a matter of process, you're saying that it's going to be presented to the Interagency Governance Group in late April, and then the submission to central government. Is there in that process a report back to this council so that we can get an idea of what it is, what it entails before the launch, which is currently scheduled for August?
Yes, Councillor. Every intention to bring it back to this table, certainly before the launch, and one of the reasons we've pushed for the launch to be later rather than earlier is to enable all of the organisations involved to have time to bring it back to their governing bodies. And one of the challenges with this exercise is that there are many organisations that have been involved in its development and own it, if you like, and many organisations that will be responsible for undertaking various actions that sit under the strategy. And so we're in that difficult situation where it's not practical for every organisation that has some involvement to go back round and iterate over and over again with its governors around further changes to the strategy. At some point we just have to draw a line under it. And so the intention will be to bring it back to this table for noting and endorsement, but not for further development. There has already been a long process involving many stakeholders in its development, but certainly that will happen as soon as the governance body has signed it off and simultaneous with it going to central government.
Thank you. My second question is on page 51, just regarding the New Zealand Transport Agency approving the use of that money, that funding for a driver licensing program. Which areas are you targeting in that one, and do you have any more details about it? I think it's a fantastic idea that we do that.
Perhaps I can answer that, excuse me. The driver licensing has essentially been targeted in areas where there are currently there's no longer an opportunity to sit the test in that area, so Wairoa, Central Hawke's Bay, and it's been targeted at the younger age group, so the youth, so that because what's been found is that quite often that is a key barrier to then being able to obtain employment, because they have to, where they live, they have to drive. They can't get their licence, they can't drive, etc. So that was really the rationale for that. It was identified as a key barrier to employment. So it's really snowballed from that.
Chairman, my understanding is it goes somewhat further than that, and to assist areas with socio-economic deprivation. To try and overcome the difficulty that low-income families or teenagers have in getting a licence, and in particular progressing past a learner stage.
Thank you. Third is okay? Okay. Just on the coastal strategy, it talks about meetings with marae committees, and it talks about marae potentially being affected. How many marae are affected? Maybe Mike might be able to. Or you, Peter?
Probably better for me. And I was going to respond to Councillor Graham as well. So we've identified, I think it's 7 marae that are perhaps the most vulnerable to sea level rise, and we're organising to meet with each of those individually. Plus, for all other marae, there will be a letter going out advising that the initial part of the study's been completed, and inviting them to contact us if they wish to have more information. Just in regard to the drop-in sessions that Councillor Graham mentioned, those sessions are they're likely to be 3 to 4 hour sessions, so that people can come and go as they wish. We'll try and get computers there so they can get the map of Hawke's Bay up, which shows the probability lines for sea level rise and inundation and also tsunami, so that they are then armed to be able to go back home and play around and bring up their own address and so forth, so that they can make informed judgments as to what's there, what's on the limbs and so forth.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Hewitt and then Councillor Dick.
Thank you. I have a few questions as well. I'll start with number one. Liz, I read somewhere that with our annual plan consultation meeting, we're going to have the plan change 6 staff in our Central Hawke's Bay meeting. Will there be other staff there with expertise in the environmental flows as well?
Environmental flows?
Well,
You're
yeah.
talking about?
I've only
as in
seen 3
science?
staff, and I was hoping we might have some other expertise in the room.
We're still actually just working through who's going to be attending which particular public meetings, but we have certainly we're trying to target relevant staff to relevant districts.
Okay, they wouldn't want to be left flying solo on that one.
No, you won't be.
Thank you. My next question, and I appreciate that Mr. Adey isn't here, but I see number 23 that with a gravel review, EMS, which I presume is Stephen Dace's company, is looking into consenting issues and ultimately funding for ongoing management. What is this about? What does it mean? Or do I need you to come back to me on that?
Well, I think probably Mr. Adey wasn't expecting this item to be on so soon, so we might get him down to answer that question for you.
Thank you, that was news to me. I'm interested in 46 and the peat soils collaborative work with regard to brown rig ag. What is that about?
So brown rig farm a large area of peat soil in the region, and there are challenges around farming peat soil in terms of best practice and impacts. So we're working with them as a significant landowner to look at options and monitor that as a result of it. So it's kind of an investigative program.
Yeah, given that a lot of that land is under Maori trustee, that will be really interesting.
And half of it is. I mean, they lease land to the west, but they own a lot of land to the east as well. Yeah.
Okay, I look forward to more on that. And just to endorse Councillor Pipe, I was keen to see a little bit more about the regional economic development strategy coming back to the table as well. So I look forward to that, which has been covered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dick.
Well, Mr Chairman, I'd like to comment on that. Again, I'm reasonably consoled by what Mr Palmer has said, but the facts of the matter are that the Regional Council is the major player in economic development in this region, and it operates across the region. Tourism, ownership of the port, our objectives with rail, the fact that we keep the Hiratonga Plains and other fertile areas supplied with water when they need it, and deal with excess water when it's not needed. Objective like Ruataniwha, we are the number one player, and unfortunately, I don't think our structure acknowledges that properly, and I think there should be at least a portfolio responsibility within this council. It's too late for this particular term, if not a committee, and it just irks me that we really have been spectators in this process. I've got every faith in Mr Palmer, but I just think we should have been involved somewhat more. The other comment I'd like to make is in relation to number 8, the Road Safe Hawke's Bay Expo Week, 16th to 20th of May. I'd recommend any councillor that hasn't attended one of those in the past that they take a couple of hours out, because every year, every year 7 high school students or those approaching the age where they're about to go for a driver's licence have approximately a 2-hour indoctrination, if we can call it that, and are exposed to the realities of the hazards of road safety in a very persuasive way. It's really good value. I'd recommend that everyone goes. I'll ask Anne to put a specific invitation out to each elected member.
Is there a charge to go?
Hmm?
Is there a
Thank
charge?
you.
Oh no.
No. Councillor Bevan.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just one comment or request, really. It's in relation to page 52 at the top, land management, where there's some discussion there. Oh, perfect timing, Mike. on the development of farm environmental management plans. I recall when Plan Change 6 was first completed, one of the key concerns that staff had was the very short time frame and the large number of farmers who were going to need to get these environmental management plans in, and the lack of consultants that were available, the lack of online tools that could help them and so forth. And I'm interested in getting a report perhaps to the next Environmental and Services Committee or the next council meeting, just saying where this is at, what the issues are, so that we're reasonably well informed as to what's going on.
So I'll jump in for Mike, because that's kind of at the heart of what I'm doing at the moment around implementation of Change 6. So there will be what we're calling a working towards implementation document going to the Regional Planning Committee on the 1st of June, right, which has quite a detailed discussion around that very issue. So that would be a really good opportunity to work through those issues with you.
That's really good, because I mean this is just the first cab off the rank. As you know, we're going to be facing this in the Heratonga next and other parts of the region, so it's pretty important that we sort of get the base right to work from.
Councillor Belford.
Yeah, I would want to heartily endorse what Councillor Dick has said about REDS and add to it that given our leadership role, presumably, in this area, that I do think deserves some preview of what's being presented to central government as a plan of action in which we might play a rather considerable role. So I don't really quite understand why that presents such a hurdle to us. This thing has been dragging on, get some kind of sense of what the hell's in the thing. That's one just comment on number 82. And a question on 66. Is this about PM10, or is it about odor, or all of the above? What is this apportionment study?
Talking about
It's number 66 under
66,
air climate.
sorry. Yeah, so source apportionment is basically just looking at what are the sources of PM10, and Awatoto is a good example where we get exceedances as a result of salt spray. Yeah.
Councillor, if I could just respond to your comment around the REDS process. Look, I've been endeavouring to get it to this table for some weeks, and there has been a little bit of concern about an eagerly anticipated document of this nature becoming public before it's launched and before a range of other governance bodies that are associated with it are also cited on it. So we're seeking to finalise the document before circulation, and it may well be possible to get it to this table prior to it going to central government. The challenge we've had with central government is they have been asking for it for some time, and ministers consider it to be somewhat tardy in arriving. And so they have even been receiving, or MB has been receiving drafts as we've been going along. So we're under pressure, if you like, from central government to finish the document. I just want to make one observation about the regional council's role in the strategy. I think when you read the document, you will see that because the document takes a wider view of the ingredients for regional economic success than we might traditionally, the role of the regional council is relatively minor. And I say that because the analytical work that's been undertaken has revealed that what's holding this region back is mostly the social conditions that arise in our more deprived parts of our community, and the readiness for those communities to engage in work, whether it be entrepreneurship, whether it be basic skills of numeracy and literacy, whether it be access to driver's licensing, as we talked about. It's a whole bunch of social conditions, and for the first time I think we're seeing a regional economic development strategy, not just focus on hard infrastructure or the innovation end of things, but actually get to the heart of what drives well-being in the community and what's holding it back. And so the actions there will lie most heavily with central government agencies, with our education and social agencies, with our DHB, etc. So while there is action in there for us to do and support we can give, the most fundamental and pressing needs of the region actually are the responsibility of others.
I'm delighted to hear that the staffs of our various councils take such a holistic and enlightened view of the foundations of economic development in the region, but I would still insist that it's inappropriate for us to simply be handed this strategy upon its completion.
There is a tension in that discussion which will come to fruition sometime shortly, I would suggest. Yeah, I think the councillors' requests are quite fair, actually. Further questions? Councillor Pipe.
I noticed, this is more for Ian actually, I noticed that we've got a lot of, a number of new staffs starting, which is great, and they're all qualified staff. I just wonder about, I don't know, maybe a comment from you. Anecdotally, we heard during the period of we were going through the amalgamation debate that it was really quite difficult to get and attract staff. So are you finding it a lot easier now, and we're getting high quality staff that are applying for work here in Hawke's Bay?
Certainly one particular role, I don't think I've brought Dr. Smith to the table yet, who's our new team leader, hydrogeology. That was a role we really struggled to recruit for, and we actually ended up having to advertise twice, and it was during the period of the amalgamation, and some of the commentary back to us was that was an obstacle because we used a recruitment specialist for that role, given it was a specialised role, and his comment back to us was that there were a number of people who were approached who weren't prepared to give up their current employment for ours, given the stage we were at in the debate. So, but subsequently, it's not an issue, and I'm really pleased that whenever we are advertising for positions, they're strongly competed for and highly qualified staff looking to come and work for us.
And I think, Councillor, that general comment applies right across council, not just in the science section. I mean, we can look now at how we've managed to, completely fill the capacity for the strategic development group, which we had struggled to do for actually years. But certainly the last, 2014 and 15, and we've completely been able to overcome that now and be able to make much stronger progress around the work program.
Okay. And just one final question. It's with regards to that thorny question about tree felling. And I noticed in the media there was quite a bit of comment, or some comment anyway, in the Te Karamu tree felling program that we had in Havelock North about a walnut tree and so forth. That all been resolved now?
Yes, and in fact that was well consulted. One of your councillors was part of the consultation. And yes, the commentary in the newspaper with the woman chaining herself to the tree, in actual fact that was a tree that was never going to come down. And the workers had actually...
she's not still there, is she?
I don't know. So, no, I think it was a bit of opportunistic reporting, but yeah, no, minimal problem, extensive consultation on it, and I think quite well supported by the community generally.
How old was the woman? Chair, I'd like to comment with you. I never spoke to the lady who changed herself to the wrong tree, but there was a lot of consultation done, but some people felt denied, and and perhaps we could have done a bit more. You can always do more on these things, and Anthony and I have lamented about that. We could have done some more, but the main protagonist, I've spoken to him 3 or 4 times, and he's quite... I don't think he's happy about it, but he understands our position, and he understands that we did do the best we could in consultation, and I think he understands the issues. Just one thing before I go, though. I'd just like to comment on James's dissertation about what the issues are, because I 100% agree the issues in economic development are not that we're not going to have economic development. It is occurring through private enterprise. It's embracing, getting the communities who are unable, for whatever reason, to embrace it. That is our challenge, and you're dead right on that. Absolutely.
Councillor Hewitt has one last question before she moves the report be received.
Thank you. I was just going to go back, Mike. Nice to see you this morning. I had a question on gravel review number 23.
Oh, gravel.
And you may wish to take it offline with me, but is there anything you'd like to add? What's going on with to the full council?
I'm looking at bringing a paper to the Environment Services Committee, or there will be a paper to the Environment Services Committee, which is a couple of weeks. So, yeah, hopefully cover the whole range of issues quite extensively in that paper.
Thank you. I'm prepared to move.
Thank you, Councillor Hewitt. Very good. Councillor Scott, further discussion?
Yes, you just cut me off there before. Just in terms of the staffing issue, is there any thought been given to making positions sort of more acceptable to Māori qualified people?
Specifically in regard to what, I mean, or, yeah, what specific Māori qualifications would you be looking for?
No, you before were talking about how staff after the amalgamation, I think, had gone away, and now there's been more, there's less reluctance about coming to Hawke's Bay, but just in terms of having more Māori on the staff, is there any sort of talk in the executive about making it more so-called acceptable, or I'm
not quite sure where you're getting at. It's certainly not unacceptable. Yeah.
No. We've the Māori committee have discussed, having more Māori staff, full stop, and there just seems to be the same comparatively low level. Is there any way that any thought been given to encouraging more Māori qualified staff? Sorry.
I think just through the student holidays we had 2 engineering students going through their civil engineering on board, and they were really well engaged and very valuable, and James had at least 2 from Tangoio on his team associated with Tangoio. So yeah, we are making efforts, but these 2, particularly the engineering students, are local guys, keen in that area that which is work associated with council. So it's the stars have aligned there, but whether or not they do in every case is a bit more challenging. Yeah.
Yeah, I know the in the Tai Whenua in Herotanga are having the same problem in reverse.
So, Mike, in our space, Mike, we you'll be aware that we brought TK into the team deliberately at that stage. Not only was he well qualified and the right person for the job, but he also opened up the ability to have dialogue with tangata whenua in a way that we hadn't before around compliance matters. And another area that I think opportunities are going to open up for soon as we're moving into implementation of new policy is Mātauranga Māori monitoring and science work that, in my view, there would be value for us in having someone with a strong Māori perspective and a good science qualification to work with us in that stuff in the future. So it's something that we're not doing, and we're not doing well at the moment, but we will do in the future, and there would be some value in having somebody who had that perspective to help us in that work.
Okay, moved and seconded. No further speakers, and sorry for cutting you off, Mr. Mohi. You wish to cup of tea time? I'll put that motion, and all those in favour, please say aye. And against, and it's carried. So 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll be back here just before 11 to talk about the annual plan progress.